Hello, everybody, and welcome to my Kingdoms Reborn Emirates guide. And today I'll be talking about the Emirates faction and kind of their differences that they have between that and the original faction, the Duchies. I'll be talking about the strengths and the weaknesses of the faction. I'll be talking about how I think that they should be played, some beginner mistakes that I see a lot of people play when they first pick up the Emirates faction, and why I think that even though it's a bit of a tougher faction to play, once you get into the mid game, they have a lot of advantages that allow you to kind of push ahead of anything that the Duchies can do. Alright, so the faction bonus for the Emirates is they have a 20% trading fee reduction. So what that means, if I go in here and buy beer, it's going to cost me roughly 200 gold, and then I pay a 30 fee. What that means is that, I'm paying 15% fee, as opposed to the duchies that pay a 35% fee. On top of this, when you sell a good, you have to pay the exact same fee. So if you're selling goods like wool, and then you turn around and want to buy something like beer, you end up paying the fee twice. So you end up with 60. And so this, over the course of the game, kind of slowly adds up and makes the Emirates a lot more richer of a faction, and it makes you more flexible, because if you run out of something like, say, coal or something like that, it's very easy to sell another good and then just buy coal for a lot cheaper, and it's a lot more efficient than if you do the same thing with the duchies. The Emirates also start with different starting buildings. They start with clay pits, and they also start with sheep ranches. However, crucially, they don't have any access to pig ranches. So there's a little bit of a debate over whether sheep ranches are better or pig ranches are better. Pig ranches produce more food. However, sheep ranches produce wool, which can be sold at a higher price. So specifically for the Emirates, because they get more money when they sell things, I think starting with sheep ranches is very, very powerful. It allows you to get a lot of early game money to kind of help push you out of the early game a bit easier, because the Emirates have a bit of early game disadvantages that I'll get into that make it a little bit more difficult. But definitely, sheep ranches are very, very good. They also have a bit of a different tech tree. They have very early access to the irrigation pump, which essentially picks up fresh water and allows you to bring it to a location and make that location have high fertility. So it allows you to farm in places like even deserts that you wouldn't normally be able to farm. And it makes you less beholden, or not beholden at all, to essentially this fertility map, and allows you to kind of place your farms where you want to, which is very, very good as you kind of expand out and you get maybe a province with a resource that you want to be able to farm, but maybe it doesn't have good fertility, and so you can fix that. They also have agave seeds and tequila distillery. It's very similar to the potato seeds and the vodka distillery that the duchies have. It's kind of the same thing. The only advantage, though, is that your people won't accidentally eat agave seeds and then shut down your tequila, which is pretty useful, which they can definitely do if you run out of food with the duchies. And then they also have this really, really good building called the Carpet Weaver. So this is a building that takes wool and dye and produces carpets. It's a tier 2 luxury. At first glance, it's like, all right, what's so special about this? But when you go into the trading screen and you look at carpet has a base cost of 75, and typically it trades at much higher than that, into the 80s. So you can essentially build these carpet makers, and then you can also research this tech over here, carpet trade, to get 0% trading fee, and you can start selling carpet for way, way higher price than it has any right to be, right? And so you can make a lot of money off that, and you can kind of use that money to buy whatever you want and kind of subsidize the rest of your city, which I think is very powerful. They also have access to spice farming. Spice farming is essentially a tier 2 version of cannabis or tulips. So you can farm for a luxury resource, which is super, super powerful, a lot more powerful than trying to make a luxury resource out of a building. And so it's definitely something you want to be doing, though it does come very late in the Enlightenment age, so it will take a while for you to actually get to it, but it's still worth doing. There's also a couple other differences, things like cactus fruit seeds. I haven't really found a good use for cactus fruit seeds, but if you do know how best to use them, definitely let me know down in the comments, or if there's anything in the tech tree you think I missed, or you have any other tips, I'd love to hear from it. The upgrades tree is basically the same. They just have a couple of different sort of special buildings that grant victory score as opposed to the duchies, but by and large, the upgrades will be the same. The faction does have some weaknesses. Their biggest thing is that they require clay to build buildings. So the duchies require just wood and stone. The Emirates require wood, stone, and clay. Now, you can gather wood and you can gather stone, but you can't really gather clay. You have to either build a clay pit and produce it, or you have to buy it. On top of that, clay pits are kind of very bad buildings. They're very, very inefficient. So what I mean by that is a clay pit has 3 workers, and they produce 12 clay, which is, 4 clay per person per batch, right? Which is like super, super, super low. Compare that to something like cannabis, which if you put down a cannabis farm is going to produce at the beginning of the game with just 100% efficiency, not including all the bonuses you can stack, you will get roughly, just about 75, maybe 80 cannabis, right? So if I open this up, I actually have tulips, which are basically, they're the same exact price, right? So if I sell 75 tulips, how much clay can that get me? And the answer is 110, right? So one person working for 1 year on a farm is going to essentially net you 110 clay. And I don't know how many batches a clay pit can produce, but given that per person you're getting 4 clay total, it's not going to get to 110 per person, right? That's just not going to happen. And so clay pits are kind of something you want to steer clear of if you want to play efficiently. However, the thing is if you're new to this game or new to especially even just the faction in general, it's very easy to misjudge your clay usage and then run out, right? And you don't want to be in the summer and then you're out of clay and you can't build anything and you have to wait for your farms to come in and then give you money, and it just becomes kind of a mess and it can kind of lock up your city. So early game, if you're new, I definitely still recommend getting clay pits, which you will need to have fresh water for, which limits exactly where you can start your city. On top of that, they have another kind of construction issue, which is they get half as much money from cutting down trees, or half as much wood from cutting down trees as the duchies do. So when you start clear cutting forest, you just get a lot less of a benefit. So it's something you kind of want to avoid if you can. Now, obviously, you're still going to need wood. You're going to need to feed your charcoal burners. You're going to need to feed your bakeries. You still need that. You're just going to be a lot less efficient at actually doing it, which is another thing, especially early game, that's going to take time. Later game, it becomes less of an issue and you can start buying wood and everything else. But yeah, so you start a lot slower as the Emirates, and the early game is a lot trickier, and it's easier to kind of run into dead ends, and then you kind of have to buy your way out of them. So it's something to kind of watch out for, and it's something that you kind of need to practice and get good at, especially at higher difficulties. Kind of going forward with that, they have stricter start requirements when it comes to where you want to put your city down, as opposed to the duchies. So with the duchies, you just can kind of look for cannabis, look for tulips, hope for both of them, make sure you have some trees, and then you just kind of place down your city wherever, right? With the Emirates, one, you don't want to put yourself right in the middle of a bunch of forest, because, well, you'll be cutting down a ton of trees and you just don't get the same benefit that you would if you're the duchies, right? A lot of people mistakenly they look at the Emirates and they're like, oh, this is a desert faction, it's a trading faction, I'm going to put myself in a desert, right? The problem is the desert bonuses you get are actually pretty good. They are essentially certain goods have 0% trading fees, so you can trade certain goods for free, which is super powerful. However, the Emirates already have a trading fee bonus, right? So you get less of a benefit from dropping yourself in the desert than you would if you were the duchies. So paradoxically, the desert faction, the Emirates, really should not put themselves down in the desert because they don't benefit that much. So you don't want to put yourself in the desert. You don't want to put yourself in the forests. Really where you want to put yourself is in the grasslands, because the Emirates are more reliant on sheep ranches early because they get them right away, and they also make more money from selling wool. So you really do want to put yourself in the grasslands and then get, the ranch productivity bonuses so you can maximize that, right? But then you also, if you want to, and you kind of want to make sure you have a little bit of a steady supply of clay, or if you want to take advantage of the irrigation pump, you need fresh water, which is something that the duchies don't. So when you're kind of thinking about where you want to put your city, it becomes a lot more difficult because, you want your cannabis or tulips, but not too much wood, but you want some wood, and then not in the desert, but you also want fresh water. It becomes kind of complicated, and it becomes a lot more difficult to find the perfect place. Now, for single player, it's not really that big of an issue because you have all the space in the world. And you can just like restart if you don't like where your city is put down, and then that's not really a problem. But if you're playing in multiplayer, where you can't restart and a lot of the best city locations will just get snapped up real quickly, you're probably going to end up with something kind of suboptimal. And as the Emirates, you're probably going to end up just like kind of buying a bunch of like goods to kind of get yourself out of a sticky situation early, which can be kind of annoying. It's slow. You're definitely going to be slower out of the early game. But it is something that with practice you can get better at. And if you do get a good start, like it can be pretty great. Let's see. However, once you get to the mid game, things start to ramp up, especially when you get your money makers kind of producing. You can become a lot richer than the duchies. And obviously in this game, money is military, so you can become a lot more powerful militarily, and you can start kind of like pushing people around, invading your friends, doing all kinds of stuff. And for that reason, I think that if you can get out of the early game reasonably well, you can do a lot of very powerful things with the Emirates that you just can't do as efficiently with the duchies. I think that's all I have to go over. If you have any questions or something, definitely let me know down in the comments. And finally, if you're wondering why I have essentially just a million sheep ranches, I'm kind of working on a strategy. I'm still kind of like workshopping a little bit, but I think I found a way, something that's like very, very broken in Kingdoms Reborn, especially like in the mid game that you can do with both factions, but especially the Emirates. So next week's video, I will be going over that, which should be interesting. If you are interested in that, or if you're interested in future guides or tips videos and stuff like that, or my deity no food let's play challenge, definitely subscribe, and I will see you in another video.